35 years on the bench in Providence have brought me face to face with tears, excuses, miracles, and the kind of truth that quietly catches you off guard. Before that morning was over, a 12-year-old boy would stand in my courtroom, look me straight in the eye, and confess to something that carried the power to alter his sister's future completely. The light through those courtroom windows was soft and gray, the particular shade of a Rhode Island morning that makes everything a little more honest. Inspector Quinn was at his customary spot. The clerk worked through the files at her steady pace. People in the gallery carried that familiar combination of worry and impatience I have witnessed thousands of times. Some arrive furious, some embarrassed, some frightened. And every now and then, someone steps through those doors carrying something far heavier than a citation. That was the feeling that settled over me the moment I first laid eyes on her. She could not have been more than 19, thin and tired, hair pulled back in a hurry. The coat she wore had seen too many winters, and in her hand she held one of those plain white envelopes people bring when they have gathered every dollar they could find. Standing close beside her was a little girl with 2 neat braids and an inhaler clipped to her pocket. One row behind sat a boy of about 12, holding himself upright through sheer force of will. This young woman kept glancing back at that boy, and the boy kept his eyes fixed on the floor as though he had swallowed something too large and too dark to look away from. 35 years of reading people told me this case was not going to be settled by the number on a parking violation. The clerk read the file. 3 violations tied to a silver Toyota Corolla on Broad Street, damage to city property, failure to secure a vehicle, leaving the scene of an incident involving a parking meter. Total owed more than $600. For certain people, $600 is an inconvenience. For others, it is food on the table, rent, medicine. Good morning. What is your name? She answered quietly, almost apologizing for being present. Elena Rivera, Your Honor. Were you driving the car? Her fingers tightened around the envelope. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The answer was caught between fear and loyalty. Finally, I told the officer it was my fault. When someone answers a direct question with an entirely different sentence, there is almost always a story living behind it. Ms. Rivera, were you driving that vehicle? Her eyes filled with tears. The little girl reached quietly for her sleeve, and before Elena could find her answer, the boy in the second row came to his feet so suddenly that his chair scraped hard across the floor. No, he said. She was not. It was me. The air seemed to leave the room. The clerk went still. Inspector Quinn turned his head. Every person in the gallery stopped everything and simply stared. I looked at that boy, and he looked back at me with the kind of courage that only surfaces when fear has finally lost its grip. Come up here, son, I said. Elena whispered his name. Mateo, no. He walked forward anyway. His sneakers had the toes worn down to white. His hands were trembling, but his chin stayed up. How old are you? 12. And what do you mean when you say it was you? He swallowed hard. The car rolled because of me. Do not make my sister pay for what I did. The courtroom went silent in that particular way it does when people stop seeing a legal matter and begin seeing a family. I turned to Elena. She was not denying him, not angry. She looked like someone who had carried a tremendous weight so long that even its exposure felt something close to relief. Is this your brother? Yes, Your Honor. And the little girl? My sister, Lucia. Young man, tell me exactly what happened. He drew in a breath I could hear from the bench. Lucia could not breathe that night. My sister had just brought her home from the clinic. There was a blue bag on the front seat with the nebulizer equipment. Lucia started coughing badly upstairs. Elena ran back into the apartment to get her shoes and call my mother. She told me to go get the blue bag from the car. I opened the door, climbed in, and hit something. The car started rolling. He stopped. His voice had fractured. Take your time, I said. He wiped his face. It rolled a little way and hit the meter. Elena ran after it. She pulled Lucia down the stairs. She was trying to stop the car and help Lucia at the same time. What did you tell the police? Elena answered. That it was my fault. Why? She looked at Mateo, then at Lucia, then back at me, because it was my responsibility. I will carry that sentence for the rest of my life, not because it was legally precise, but because of what it revealed about her character. There are people who run from blame even when it belongs entirely to them. And there are people who step directly into blame because their love for someone else is larger than their fear of what follows. The clerk confirmed $420.37, not enough to cover the full balance. That amount does not simply appear in a household running on the edge. That is skipped meals, overtime shifts, a 19-year-old surrendering her safety margin just to stand before a court and say, "Please do not make this worse." In the file, I found something attached behind the notice, a photocopy of a hospital wristband and pharmacy receipt Elena had submitted with an earlier continuance request. The date on the wristband matched the date of the incident. The receipt was for albuterol solution. I turned to Mateo. "Why did you decide to tell the truth today?" Something in his eyes reminded me of the children I grew up alongside in Federal Hill. Proud kids, poor kids, kids who learned far too early that survival and guilt tend to share the same address. He said because she was going to pay for something I did, and because she told me it was okay if she paid, but it is not okay. Where is your mother? She works nights cleaning offices. She could not afford to miss another shift. And your father? She lowered her eyes. He passed away 3 years ago. The prosecutor had stayed quiet through most of this. A good prosecutor understands that justice is not a competition to produce the harshest possible result. I asked whether any witness had actually observed Ms. Rivera operating the vehicle. No, Your Honor, only her own statement at the scene. I turned to Inspector Quinn. He said nothing, but his expression said everything. After all our years together, I could read that look without difficulty. It said, "This family is telling the truth." "Were the keys in the ignition?" Elena answered. "Yes, Your Honor." I had run upstairs for less than a minute. Lucia was wheezing badly. I left them in because I was panicking. Panic makes people do things they would never otherwise do. It does not make them bad people. A large portion of the people who stand before me are not criminals at heart. They are overwhelmed, attempting to manage more than any reasonable life should require. Then Mateo said, "If Elena has to pay more money, she cannot buy Lucia's medicine this month." The little girl did not look up. She simply held on to her inhaler. My throat tightened. "Miss Rivera, what do you do for work?" "I work mornings at a bakery and 3 nights a week in a nursing home kitchen." "And school?" "I am in a CNA program." "Why?" She looked genuinely surprised. "Because I want something better for us, and because I already take care of people every day. There are sentences that sound simple until they open something in you." I noticed Mateo watching her the way children watch the person who has become their foundation, not his sister, his shelter. Then Elena produced a letter from the director of her CNA program. She had come close to withdrawing twice because of family obligations, but remained one of the strongest students in the cohort, with perfect clinical attendance, save one emergency absence tied to her sister's breathing complications. Then Mateo said the thing that dissolved whatever distance remained between that bench and that family. "She already does everything. Please do not make her lose this too." He did not say, "Do not punish me." He did not say we cannot afford it. He said she already does everything. That child was asking a court to acknowledge labor that no statute names and no invoice records, the invisible labor of holding a family together. I had to clear my throat before I could continue. On the charge alleging that Ms. Rivera operated the vehicle into city property, I do not find sufficient evidence of operation by this defendant. I am exonerating you on that charge based on the credible facts the court has received today. On the allegation that you left the scene, the record shows you remained present, contacted emergency services, and were on the scene when officers arrived. That charge is also not sustained. Ms. Rivera, I cannot disregard that the keys were left accessible and the vehicle was not properly secured. Even in a genuine emergency, that created a dangerous situation. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. You accept responsibility for that element? Yes. That honesty mattered more than she may have realized. I looked at Mateo. What do your grades look like? Pretty good. Meaning what exactly? Mostly A's. 1B in math. I looked at him over my glasses. What am I going to do with you? A B in math? The courtroom laughed, and I was grateful for it. I turned to Elena. Are you going to finish that nursing program? If I can, yes. Let me ask that differently. Are you going to finish it? She met my eyes, and for the first time, something firm lived in her voice. Yes, Your Honor, I am. That is considerably better. On the remaining safety violation, I am imposing a penalty of $10. Elena stared, not yet grasping what was happening. Then I raised my hand. I am remitting the $10. The room gasped. I am not taking a single dollar from a young woman who has spent months paying in worry and sacrifice for a mistake made in the middle of a medical emergency. The law has been respected. The lesson has been learned. This court will not add hunger to hardship. Lucia began clapping before anyone else had reacted. Inspector Quinn turned briefly away and smiled. Elena held up the money order. Your Honor? No, I said. Please at least allow me to. No. Take that money, buy the medication, buy groceries, and find somewhere to hang those car keys where your brother cannot appoint himself the family chauffeur again. Mateo dropped his head and smiled in a way he had not allowed himself since walking into that building. Truth matters in this courtroom, I said. Responsibility matters. But so does grace. You stood here today and told the truth when staying silent would have been considerably easier. That counts here. I do not want a paperwork shadow following you into that training placement, I told Elena. The weight on her shoulders when she first walked through those doors began slowly to lift. When you complete that program, I want you to remember today, not because a judge helped you, because the truth helped you. I know there are people who hear cases like this and say it sounds too lenient. Mercy is not weakness when it is grounded in verified facts, demonstrated honesty, and genuine accountability. Mercy is strength exercised with care. I did not reward recklessness. I recognized an emergency, weighed the truth placed before me, and refused to allow bureaucracy to flatten a family doing everything within its power to stay upright. That is not weakness. That is justice with a heartbeat. About 3 months later, my clerk brought me an envelope. Elena had completed her CNA placement and been offered part-time employment at the same facility. Lucia had gone weeks without a serious breathing episode. Mateo had brought his mathematics grade to an A-. In parentheses, Elena added, he asked me to make sure you know that specifically. That made me laugh out loud sitting alone in my office. A photograph had been clipped to the letter. Elena stood in pale blue scrubs. Mateo was beside her, already noticeably taller. Lucia stood in front of them both, holding the inhaler up like something to be proud of. On the back, Elena had written 4 words. You saw us today. I set that photograph down and sat quietly. A judge does not typically receive updates on what became of the people who stood before them. You hope your decision served them well, but you rarely receive confirmation. That day, I received it, and it reminded me of something I have believed for as long as I have held this position. We pass judgment in the lives of other people every day, but what we ourselves will be judged by in the end is the hope we brought to the hopeless and the difference we made in the lives we were trusted to touch. The heroes of that morning were never sitting on the bench. They were standing at the podium. Elena could have stayed quiet and paid what she could. Mateo could have remained in the second row and let his sister keep bearing the weight of what he had done. Instead, all 3 of them showed that room what a family looks like when life becomes genuinely hard, messy and frightened and imperfect and deeply, unconditionally loving. The most unforgettable moment was not the ruling. It was the instant Elena realized she did not have to choose between satisfying the court and buying her sister's medication. The expression that crossed her face, that mixture of disbelief and release, is not something a judge should ever take for granted. It is something closer to sacred. And it is why I came back to that bench every morning for 35 years.